Welcome to Chess to Impress. These are lessons for beginners who have just started playing chess and know the basic laws of the game. As we progress in this series, we will discover and talk about various themes that will help you build a strong base. Today's lesson number 9, and lesson number 9 is about threats. How do you threat or how do you take care of your opponent's threat? In chess, when you attack a piece, it is called threatening. It is very important to threaten your opponent's pieces and look for threats against your pieces. One of the black's pieces in this position is in danger. Which piece is it and where should they go? Of course, it is quite evident if you take a look at all the black's pieces. The piece which is in danger, the piece which is threatened, is the rook on a6. Which piece threatens it? The bishop on e2 threatens our rook on a6. So what do? We need to take care of this threat. There is no way we can block it, because if we block, the bishop is just going to capture our bishop for free, which is really bad. We do not love to give our pieces for free. So where should we move this rook and create a counter threat of our own? There are a lot of answers, but the correct answer is rook to f6 or rook to a2. Right? These are some of the good options. I love these moves. Now you might argue, why is this move not good? This move rook to e6 is not good because they can again counter threat you by creating this attack, right? So we should always be really careful when we create a counter threat of our own. So rook f6 is completely fine, because not only did we manage to save our rook, but we also are threatening to capture their knight. Also, rook to a2, there is no harm done. The bishop is under attack. Once the bishop moves, we'll be able to capture their pawn on f2 for free, right? That's what we are interested in. That's what we are looking for. Cool. Position number 2. In this position, we need to find two good moves that white can make to threaten black's pieces. Right, of course we cannot use our knight, because knight, even though we move our knight to d4 or f4, it won't really threaten anything. I know it's looking at the pawn, but the pawn is absolutely protected. It's clearly protected. We cannot move our knight, which makes it quite evident that we need to use our bishop. Now the question is, we need two moves with the bishop. We need two squares wherein the bishop will produce a threat or make a threat to attack a black piece. So the correct move is bishop e4. The first move, bishop e4. Why? Because it threatens to capture the rook on the h1, a8 diagonal, right? The bishops are strong pieces on these long-range diagonals. So yes, the bishop on e4 threatens to capture the rook on b7. Not only that, if you move your bishop to g6, right? If you move your bishop to g6, this is also a very good move, because if you move your bishop to g6, it threatens to capture the knight. Now let's say if you were to, let's imagine you move your bishop on e4. Now imagine you're playing as black. How can black respond to this threat? How can black produce one counter threat of his own? Think for a minute. Pause the video. Black can produce a counter threat by playing the move d5. Right? Not only did he manage to block the bishop's attack, but this pawn now threatens to capture the white's bishop. And about the second move, if bishop goes to g6, black can produce a counter threat by moving his knight. Where should we move the knight? The knight on the edges, I do not like them. Even though it does produce a counter threat, nah. So where should we go? We should go on e5. If the knight goes to e5, it produces a counter threat of its own. Not only the knight is on a better square, not only the knight is centralized, but it also aims at the bishop. It aims to threaten. It threatens to capture the bishop, right? So if somebody attacks you, if somebody threatens to capture your piece, you should look for counter attacks or counter threats. Position number 3. Now this is very important position. What is white's threat? White's threat, imagine you're playing as white. What is your threat? What are you threatening? You're threatening to capture the bishop on c5 with your pawn. Now the question is this a real threat? What would happen if you take the bishop? If you take the bishop, the rook's file will be open, and the rook will capture our bishop. So imagine if you were to take pawn capture c5, right? The rook on b8 will capture our bishop on b1 with a check, and this is completely winning for black because 5 points against 3 points. Okay, black's just going to capture these pawns and it's just going to be game over for white, right? So therefore, if you were playing white, what would you do to make this threat better? I would want to get this bishop out of the way, right? If you manage to get this bishop off the way, then maybe you can capture. And the correct way to get the bishop off the way is maybe make an in-between move. In-between move, like I said, are checks. So what do? You get the bishop off the way by giving a nice check on g6. Irrespective of wherever the king goes, the king has got 3 squares. Let's say the king goes to f8. Now this threat is a real threat. So you should now go ahead and capture that. Perfect, right? So first get your bishop out so that you can then capture the bishop, because if you captured the bishop now, you're going to lose the bishop on b1. So give a check, let the king move, and then you capture their bishop. All right, position number 4. What does black threat and what are all of the black's threat? Okay, so there are 3 threats. First, it aims to capture our queen. Second, the knight on f5 is a powerful piece. It looks at both these pawns. Is there a way for white to save their queen and defend against all the threats? Save the queen, not only save the queen and also not only save the queen, but also manage to save those 2 pawns on e3 and h4. So it's quite evident we need to move our queen. And how do we save both of them? By making sure the queen protects. The queen looks at both those pawns. So you should slide your queen to f2, which means not only have you managed to make your queen safe, but also these pawns are well protected against the threat of the knight. And the last position. What are all the black's threats? Black is threatening to take the pawn on c2. Moreover, it's threatening to capture this pawn on c2 with its rook, right? So all these threats are there. How can white protect this threat? What is the best way to protect the threat? One would be c3. I like it, but you do not get or you do not achieve anything in return. Whenever somebody threatens you, you need to counter threat. So this is not a counter threatening move. Even if you play knight a1, this is not bad, but again, you're moving your knight to the edge of the board and like it's at the corner, and again, it's not counter threatening. So the correct move or the best move would be to play knight d4. The knight not only defends the pawn on c2, but it produces a threat of its own, which is to capture the rook on c6. So make good threats. Always play chess to attack, and if somebody attacks your piece, then you make sure you counter threat if there is a move that can be made.